See? I got you covered. We're moving. Love the conversation, so don't you? If I can ever get that preacher to sit down, we'll be okay. Holding court back there. Yeah. It's only getting to 5 minutes we get them on track there. Some are still coming in. Will you bow with me, please? Father, we come to you today. We have the opportunity to learn more about your will, and that is a tremendous, tremendous blessing for us to have that alive in our hearts. We know that you are here. We know that you've given us the Spirit within us to give us better understanding. Please, dear Father, be with us today. Be with me personally, that I present your word in all honesty and truth. Thank you so very much for the day. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. If you'll look at the top of your notes that I've given you this time, I had at the end of the class last week where John Thompson came up to me and told me that he was taught in his Bible work that the term mystery was this, and I wanted to bring it forward to you and have it for you. Information that was concealed until it was divinely revealed. And I really appreciated that, John. So I asked him when I got back home to please send that to me so you would have it. He offered this as well in Ephesians, where Paul is talking to the Jews and says the mystery that the Gentiles are going to be saved the same way you are was not revealed until later. And so that's an additional part about that, which gives a lot more strength to what I was talking about last week. So that's good. Good morning. Now, before we start, I have something special. And it's amazing when we have a trite phrase that says, we don't judge a book by its what? Cover. In other words, you go deeper into the individual, you find a lot of different things that we have not really looked at before, and specifically to our brother here. So he has, as you know, a sock fetish that controls his life. It's well known, not only in the personal circles, but also around the country and internationally. It became such an issue in the media that a phrase was generated in the 1960s and 70s that spawned a whole show and became part of our nomenclature. It was sock it to me. So we're going to sock it to Ethan this morning. We have 6 different pairs of socks for him. I want you to come up, Ethan. Now we're not going to go through all 6. Go ahead and come up here.
Where am I supposed to be now?
Right over here. I hope you're not as bad as Glenn Mayblade.
Am I supposed to face that way or this way?
Go face that way.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. Glenn Mabley's like trying to bathe a cat, and I had him up here, so I hope you're better at that instructions. So anyway, here we have the socks, And so we have the first sock, where Linda's going to give you here, our Vanna White. And so when you get through with the wrapping, just give it to her. Now I want you to hold the socks up. Now they're going to be small, so I'll have to get it for everybody. So this is called the bike ticket socks. Now most of you don't realize that Ethan is a really great kind of a gymnast with a bicycle, and I have a picture of him in Springs Mall this last month. He commandeered the bike from this poor kid on the left to show up the kid on what he should be doing and how he could do the trick. But if you look at the lady on the right, she is in sheer terror.
Yes.
And the kid got his hands over his eyes because he can't wait for the impending doom to occur. But Ethan is really good at the trick socks. So you can give the present back to Linda. She'll keep that one.
Okay.
So the next one is present number 2. This is my favorite. This is called the footnote socks. And as you know, Ethan loves to sing. Has a great, wonderful high C soprano voice that he sings. So now he can put those socks on when you have singing, and you're right there. You know, Corinthians.
Now, how do I see? I would have to be a contortionist to be able to see this while I'm singing.
I don't do that. I don't answer the questions. I just give you the presents. By the way, what socks do you have on this morning? Ah, okay.
Big Bird.
Big Bird. Right? See, we're right on track. Told you. Anyway, the next is present number 5. Now this one goes a little deeper. I told you that you have individuals that have secular references, and then those that are national and international. This is our international part of it. You can see the sock here, what it looks like. Now we're not going to go in and to do anything more than just give him background. And he was a secret agent in his lifetime before. And that sock goes back to the point of what he wore at the time that he was there. So I knew right when I first met him about over 30 years ago, when he came to me and introduced himself, he said, "My name is Roberts, Ethan Roberts." And I knew that he had influenced Ian Fleming back to the James Bond area. And so we have the socks he can wear that goes with the uniform, that now that you're retired, but you still have those mental frameworks.
And this is specific for left and right.
It is. It is. I've got a manual so you can figure that out too. I'll give you. So he wasn't well known as MI5 and MI6. In fact, it was a precursor called MI 2.67. So now you have that social influence of international. Now this one is a very unique one that he's got. And I need to preface that a little first. So those of you that know that Ethan was involved with Copper Basin Bible Camp for several centuries. And when Linda and I went up to see him a few years ago and had lunch with him in Prescott, and he told us about all of the what am I thinking about? Path.
I have no idea.
Well, I was hoping you'd help me. The paths out there that he had gone on his time we had off. And he gave us a place to go where we had a walk, had a nice vista, and we came back and then we had a lunch with him later. But really we found out that his mission was to find Bigfoot. And that's why he was out there in the traipsing around in the country to do that. And he was, here's the pair of socks, what it looks like. It's a Sasquatch socks. So now you can have a full ensemble when you go out looking for the Sasquatch next time.
That's really, I really appreciate the help and all of these endeavors.
Okay, well, I'm glad you do, Ethan. So a few years ago, he was really excited because he thought he had a personal sighting. And so he called a U.S. Forest Service and the media to come out and investigate what was going on here. And so they came out and investigated, but alas, what they found was that Brother Charles Little was in Phoenix at the time of the sighting. For those who don't know Charles Little, in comparison to Bigfoot. Okay, so on a bad note. Thank you very much, Ethan. Now,
thank you.
the other two are there, and what we have is Stephanie is excited about that because she feels that the extra stimuli will keep you awake during Sean's lesson. So there you have it.
Well, that's true. If I just look down at it, it wakes me right up, and I don't even snore.
Don't thank me even more. Okay. I hope Charles Little's watching. I'm going to send him a note and say that I got him this morning. Last week also, after class, Steve came up and said that those three Gospels, all three are written differently, and I appreciate that as well. So let's look at Matthew a little bit before we go. This parable is only mentioned in Matthew, nowhere else. It is interesting because it's the same time that Jesus spoke the last parable. And I'll give you that chronological listing there. But why Matthew? So let's look at Matthew. Why was Matthew written? It was written to validate the fact that Jesus was the Messiah. It was written for the Jews. 30 times in Matthew, it's stated where Jesus says about himself or reference him that he's the Son of Man. Why would that be significant? Why would the statement Son of Man be significant for the Jews? It fulfilled what prophecy? He'd be born of a virgin. 9 times in there, it's mentioned that he is the Son of God. Why is that significant? Because he was the Messiah. So Matthew is full of this. In fact, if you look at Matthew, Matthew 1 starts with what? The genealogy. Because 2 prophecies are there. He had to be born of the tribe of Judah, and also he had to be born in the lineage of David. Both of those are confirmed within Matthew. So Matthew is constantly going through, focusing on the fact that Jesus was the Messiah. Now, I picked this up, and this is the parable of the wheat and the tares, or as I have up here, the wheat and the weeds. So let's look at it. There are 11 different metaphors in here. There's a major controversy in here as well that we need to explore. 2 of those metaphors are very important for us to understand the controversy. So we're reading it. Jesus presented another parable to them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprouted and bore grain, then the tares became evident also." 7 metaphors in there. Now you'll note that, as I told you the last couple of weeks, I have put in purple those things that are reference to Jesus, God, and then heavenly issues. You'll see the kingdom of heaven is not capitalized, nor is it in purple, for a reason. And the people that translated the New Testament purposefully put this in lowercase, not uppercase, again, for a reason. So we'll get through these. Jesus has an explanation later, which will bring all of these 11 metaphors forward, but you can see many of them here. Kingdom of heaven, a man sowed good seed in his field. So the field and the kingdom of heaven are going to be related here. And then the enemy, we're going to find out who that is, and then the tares and wheat. Now, good seed and wheat don't necessarily connect. Obviously, it does because Jesus sowed the good seed, which we said was what last week? The Word. Very good. So the Word. But have you ever been around people that heard the Word, were baptized, but didn't follow through? Yes. So the wheat not necessarily was all the individuals that heard the good seed. So there's a separation that's there. Going on with the reading. The slaves of the landowner came and said to him, "Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares?" And he said to them, "An enemy has done this." The slaves said to him, "Do you want us then to go and gather them up?" So slaves and servants, and also you're going to see a little later, the reapers are the same reference. But he said, "No, for while you are gathering up the tares, you may uproot the wheat with them. Allow them to grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat into my barn." So you see the slaves, servants, and reapers are all the same, referencing the same metaphor for the 3 individuals. But the time of harvest is going to be what? Judgment. When he comes back, there's going to be a judgment. And you see that the tares are going to be what? Burn up. And then the wheat goes into the barn. So we can understand the reference of the metaphor there, barn being heaven. So let's go and look. This is the end of what he said in the parable. Jesus is going to explain this. He's going to explain it very, very simplistically. So let's look at it. Then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field." Now I want to stop here for a second, because I told you that this parable is chronologically listed to the last one. If you look at Matthew chapter 13, verse 1, it says, "And Jesus left the house." It's important for us in our language as well as the Greek language, when you have a an article that's right before a noun, it's very specific. There's something different about it. So in the first verse it said, Jesus left the house. And then in this one it says, and Jesus came back to the house. We don't know what reference there is, but something Matthew had, that was a house that had importance for him. So let's look at the house, because our houses today are much larger than the houses back then. In archaeology, they use a term called a four-room house for Judean houses back in the Iron Age. It doesn't mean it's all houses had 4 rooms, but it's classically called a 4-room house. Some had 3, some had 7. But the design of the house was so different that archaeologists will say the Jews lived there in the house because that house is designed by those that were Jewish. I'll be honest with you, Canaanites before that had a house similar to that, but this one is associated with the Jews. So why's the point? In this house had a great room. And that great room was divided by pillars, which supported an upper room. But that room was divided by archaeologists to say there were room 3 and room 4. I was going to show you a picture of that, but I didn't want to bring that into you. But let's look at the great room. So who comes in? His disciples came to him in the house. You can't put a lot of people in that house. If it's less than 1,000 square feet, and this room takes up about half of that, there's not a lot of room for people to stand around. So we know very specifically that the disciples, probably some of their family, were there. But all of these were believers that were following him at the time. And he said, the one who sows the good seed is Son of Man. Remember, I told you 30 times in Matthew it's referenced. Jesus references to himself, I am the Son of Man. Again, fulfill that prophecy of being born of a virgin. And the field is the what? World. So the kingdom of heaven and the field are the same. And he'll reference that in other parts of this. And as for the good seed, they are the sons of the kingdom, those that have heard the word and accepted the word. And the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil, the culprit, as we talked about last week. Whatever bad's happening, go back to who's doing it. Because it gives us a reference about if we stay there, what is the reference or influence we have at the time. And the harvest is the end of the age, which we said here earlier was the time when Christ is going to come, and that's going to be the end of what we know physicality here. And the reapers are what? Angels. So his angels are going to be active. The servants, slaves, and the reapers are all the same metaphor. And just as the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age. So those that are the sons of the enemy, sons of the devil, are going to be burned up. That time is going to be one side or the other, and that's it. The Son of Man, second time he said it, will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness. Now we start running into a problem here if we don't define and continue to define the field in the kingdom of heaven as the world. And that's what I want to bring here, because we have too many issues with that in our brotherhood as well as in the outside world, religious world. And we'll throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, someplace we don't want to visit. Then the righteous will shine forth as the son of the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. We said in the beginning of the parables that most of the time when we have this phrase, it's referencing the people that are baptized believers. Now, in the last parable, I told you that is a little bit different because then there was a combination of people that were believers and those are non-believers. This being very specific because guess who was in that house? His disciples. They were baptized believers. He's speaking very specific to them. You should know this. This is important for you because this is talking about when I come again and all of that is broken up. So, he who has ears, let him hear, very specifically to those disciples and apostles that were in the place. So now we have gone through the parable and we have the explanation. So let's go back and look at it a little bit differently, and then at the end I'll bring it all together, hopefully as a review, which will help you. Anytime during this, because I get a momentum, just raise your hand and say, wait a second, I have a question. I don't understand this. I'll be more than happy to stop and we'll go through and see if I can give you a better explanation. So this is the first of 8 different parables about the kingdom of heaven, which that word is being used, or that phrase being used in there. This is the one that's recorded in Matthew, and the only one of those 8 recorded by Matthew. So we have the metaphors of the wheat and the tares. The wheat, we said, are those individuals that stay the fight, that are going to be ready for Jesus to come, and then go with him up into heaven. And the tares are going to be those individuals that are unbelievers, are those that are scoffers, those that push out against the church, and they are going to be burned up at the end. But again, this is the only one recorded in Matthew. So we have it chronologically listed right at the same sermon, one at the beginning and one at the end, bookends, but this is the only one recorded in Matthew. So it takes that, which Jesus talked about earlier with the seeds, the sower, they're the same. It's interesting with the parables because sometimes a reference used before doesn't carry over to the next parable. This one does. The sower and the seed are the same here. And the tares are much like the thorns, which we had in the last parable as well. But it's a little different in this parable than the last one, because the first one said the thorns were concerned or connected with the worries and deceitfulness of wealth. Now, I'll be honest, there are some of that here with this parable with the tares, but it goes a little bit further in what's going on. It looks at those weeds and tares as specifically the unbelievers, those people that pushed back against Christ, or those that are the sons of evil. This parable has 11 metaphors. It's chock full of spiritual references in it. We've gone through very peripherally and looked at those 11. I'll go back and shine a little bit more light or illuminate a little bit more on those and strengths that are associated with it. So let's look at the difficulty there. If we take this, which I have heard sermons that stated that this parable was talking about the condition of the church. If we take that and we run with it, the context doesn't fit. Now, I'll be honest with you, yes, there are individuals that are not spiritually strong that are in the church, but now we go to Matthew 13, 36 through 43, and you'll see there's a conflict. If we take the church, this is in conflict later. So let's look at Matthew 13, 36 through 43. Many commentators and sermons have been placed on this, saying that if it's a church, then it's illustrating the condition of the church. But what does Matthew say? Matthew here, I've given it in your notes. I thought that was right after this. Okay, so the wheat is going to be those individuals that are believers, and the false professors are the weeds or tares, their local church. But in verse 38, we see a problem with that, because now if we let it be the church only, now what do we do with the discipline of the church? Because if we go with that parable, the parable says, keep them until the end of the age. That is, we said, what? When Jesus comes again. So that means we leave them in the church? So what about church discipline? There's a conundrum that's there. So this misinterpretation is not new. It's been involved with the spiritual world or the religious world for several centuries. So, I don't know what happened to that slide. Do you have it in your notes that right after this, that was the scripture? Did I have it in there? Anyway, I know it's in there somewhere. Let me see if I've got this mixed up. So, if what we're saying about the kingdom of heaven is talking about the world today, and it's not a distinct destination later, it is coming back and saying it is what's happening right now at this time. So it can be very puzzling to look at the context of the Bible and say, Jesus is talking here about keeping those individuals that are not Christians in the church where their influence is going to be here, or we talk about disciplining them and then moving them out of the church. So, now here it is. So it's a reference to the world or to the church. So let's look at it from the standpoint now. So I'm going to throw up the caution sign and say, please don't look at church. Don't put that in here, because you're going to have all kinds of problems, especially in 5 epistles later, about church discipline, because it says in this parable, wait until the end of the world. Don't get rid of them then. Now we have a problem with church discipline. Emphatically, he said it was the world, that the field and the kingdom of heaven is the world. The landowner said, leave him there. Leave him until the end. So a lot of people come back and say, let's not deal with it, because God in the final judgment is going to make that. Leave them in the church. So now we're going to get to there in Matthew 18, 15 through 17. I'm a little ahead of myself. Now, if your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. That means that this person is a sinner, and you go to him privately and say, here's your sin. We need to repent. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. What does that mean? If he listens and does something about it, then you have brought him back into salvation. You give him that chance to see the faults and come back. Church discipline. But it's love. We start with the love first. But if he does not listen to you, take one or more with you, so that the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter will be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the what? Church, that's us. Bring it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. To the most reviling words to a Jew must be reference to a Gentile or a tax collector. Worse than that is a Samaritan. So in other words, this is saying, remove that individual from the church to keep it pure. Excuse me. Which tells us how we must deal with the church and with the discipline. It is not the only place that church discipline is mentioned, so the context we must follow through that as well. I'm going to bring in this. This is one of our brothers in the Bellflower congregation of Rose Avenue Church of Christ, and I have taken part of his sermon, which I've read several weeks ago, and I want to bring that to you here. And his title is The Field of the World. Again, Jesus defines this parameter. So a little bit of a long quote, but I want to take it specifically from him. We sometime in this parable speak of it as being the church and use it as application that within the church there may be those who are weeds rather than wheat. And I agree, there are people that are weeds and wheat. And while that may be true, here, Jesus identifies this as the world. This parable does not teach the removal of church discipline at all. We have used this parable to say that we should not withdraw from anyone anymore, because God will judge in the end, time of the harvest. They reason that since the wicked and the righteous dwell together in the kingdom, and since the kingdom is the church, that we not need to worry about discipline, in this case, church discipline. This contradicts what Jesus taught later in Matthew, which I've already given to you, and sometimes continually emphasized in the apostles, 1 Corinthians, 2 Thessalonians, Romans, and 2 John. These are not the only ones about church discipline, but I want to focus on 1 Corinthians here, one verse. 1 Corinthians 5:11, which I have put in your notes. You can follow those. But actually I write to you not to associate with any so-called brother if he is, and he gives six different references. Sexually immoral person, or a greedy person, or an idolater, or is verbally abusive, or habitually drunk, or a swindler. What did you go on to say? Don't even eat with them. In fact, one of the other epistles says don't even address them. Don't even acknowledge them. Very tough for us to go through that, to see that, but the reality is why? The whole idea is keeping the church as pure as possible, removing those influences that are negative to us. And I know that the elders do that work for us. We don't see that. I've heard that going through. Continuing with this quote. While it may be true that in the church there are some who are hypocrites and others who persist in unknown sins, that God will, on that day, judge righteously. That does not exempt the church from taking whatever measures are necessary to keep the church pure. What is happening in the religious world is, and has been for a while, that this is being used and says at the church, and therefore, since it's wait until Jesus comes, don't discipline. That's catastrophic for a church. Catastrophic. So please, in this, looking at the major point I want to bring across here, which I have probably said this to ad nauseum, but is that this must be focused on the world rather than the church. So I've thrown a lot of things, and this is a lot of weight here. Questions you might have or comments? Yes?
I think for church discipline to be practiced, it takes extremely wise elders. My own personal experience is I have never seen it not tear a church up. That's because we've had leadership that's in different places. I'm not speaking about here, but in different places we've lived. It has to be done with great wisdom and love, and typically it hasn't been in my experience.
Chuck, to bring that forward, you may not have heard that, as Chuck was saying that he's not seen the discipline like that in the church. Is that right? Did I bring it back correctly? I have, but I'll be honest with you, it's very rare. It's not fun. It's not what we like, because we are ones of love, and God is love. And it's very difficult to go public with individuals and discipline them. But the problem we run into is that if they stay, their influence can be catastrophic. And what is the guise here? What is the focus for discipline anyway? To bring them back. It's to admonish them where they look at it and say, I'm wrong, and I want to change. It's not where we get up and we just willy-nilly throw people out. That's not the context here. The context has to be in love. But I have seen it, and I've seen it work. And I've seen it where it was really negatively generated and the church split. It's a very tedious, but also a very intricate process that we must use, but it must be given. It must be part of who we are. Any other comments? Thank you, Chuck. Any other comments you might have?
You know, it is hard. And one thing that I think gets in our way is integrity. You know, we don't want to hurt somebody's integrity, but then again, if you don't bring it up and explain what this person is doing, you know, we're just feeding, you know, that person to do what's wrong.
So Jeff brought up the point of integrity. And I always hear, or part of what I saw within the discipline was that you judge me. So it's really an intricate balance we have there. But if you go in love and you show it, and if their love for their soul is there, it'll mesh. But it's got to be in love. And you're right, the integrity is a key piece. That if I sin, if somebody comes to me, it'll tell me whether or not I really want to be with God. So I listen and I do what I'm supposed to do. If I want to be rebellious, I will be rebellious right at the beginning. But it's really hard. But the key piece I want to bring forward is do it in private first. This is not a gang mentality. It's not get a bunch of people and go. It's come into the brethren, which we know we have to have that love already established, but give them a hug and say, what's wrong? How can I help you? And present it in love first. And that's a critical piece. Because sometimes, as Chuck said, and what I've experienced, it was not out of love. It was direct, and it was a personality issue, and it split things. So it is interesting, but it's critical for us here. Very good. Thank you for the comment. So going back here to the weed. So we believe that it's the bearded darnel plant that you can see in the top here. And in the olden times, that crops usually, when they had, we'll use the term here, the wise farmer. In just a second, I'll define that. It's for a large farmer. But what they would do is, if they sabotaged the field, that means the price of their wheat became higher. So it's a marketability. And it happened, and they knew that it happened in the time of Jesus. So the tares were this, the bearded darnel plant. You can see it up in the top. It looks a lot like wheat. It's a smaller stalk, doesn't get as high as wheat, but it looks the same until it matures. So you can't tell the difference when they're growing up. So with a time with Jesus' time, we didn't have the weed killers. So now the roots are intermingled with wheat. And that's why he was saying, don't pull up the wheat, because you do, you're going to pull up some of the, don't pull up the tares because the wheat's going to be there. So let's look back and what the reference is to the wise farmer. The wise farmer that we see in the New Testament usually indicates a person with a large land ownership or in control of a large land. So using that as a focus, what would we call a wise farmer of a small farm? Of course, is a wiseacre. I told you I'd teach you something. But clinically, use the wise farmer is usually a large landowner. So in tearing out the tares, leaving the wheat there, now we can cultivate that and we can get the crop, but we can also find a way to reduce down what happens with the tares. So God said that what's going to happen is when he comes, he's going to separate everybody out. And who's going to do that? The angels. Job is to go in to determine who's going to stay, who's going to go. Who's going to go to the left, who's going to the right. Oh, the angels, and that's what he said in this parable. So there are about 3 ways we can look at in that time and say, how did he separate the wheat from the tares? What's going to be burnt and what is going to be kept or put in the barn? The first of these is as they mature, the wheat is going to grow higher, the tares are going to be lower. So they harvest the top end where the wheat was, they leave the tares in the field, then they burn the field. They'll get rid of all the seed in the tares and prepare for next year. The second would be not as efficient as the first, but they would go reap the field. That means they take all the things in and then have to separate out the tares from the wheat. Very inefficient, but it could be done. The third is the least efficient, and that's before the grain is milled. They would pick out all the little seeds from it, which would take them too long. But we can see by giving that is that it's going to have to be very manual process. It is not one in which is going to be, like we have, more mechanized or efficient. So let's review back what Jesus explained this parable to be. So who is Jesus? He's the sower. He's the landowner. He's the sir that's referenced there. So Jesus is that individual. He spreads his word, which we know as the gospel. In the last one, he sows it everywhere. He says that the people, everybody gets the opportunity to choose. And we said in these parables, it all comes back to the condition of the heart. If the heart's not right, they're not going to listen to the word. Heart's right, they're going to listen to the word. The closer the heart is to God, the more continuance is going to happen till the end. But this feel of the world is going to be the critical piece about understanding this parable. Through his grace, these Christians bear the fruit of the Spirit. We went into that a little bit last week. We said the fruits are here, which we understand. Why is that? Why are they the fruits? Because they're ways in which we show we live like Christ, because Christ had those part of his personality. Our presence in the earth is the reason the kingdom of heaven is like the field of the world, which Jesus referenced twice in there. So who's the enemy? The enemy is Satan. Why? Because he's a liar, and he's the prince of all lies. He tells us something that gives us a little bit of stability, but then takes it away, which causes us to move further in there to try to find out if it's right or wrong. That's why he's the chief of lies. So in opposition to Jesus Christ, he sows the tares. He goes to where the hearts are, and he sows discontent, or a question mark, or a puzzle, which causes it to slow down. The more we slow down, the momentum is lost, the better chance he has of catching us. Another good test, and we're going to close this out here for us to understand, is what we see in 1 John, chapter 2, verses 3 through 6. If we know him, we what? We obey him. Categorically. If we're not obeying him, we don't know him. If we're not obeying him, we're not in love with him. And that's where we need to be. So if someone claims that they know God, this scripture is based on that, and doesn't obey God's commandments, that person is what? A liar. Guess who's the chief of liars? I said in here, it's the devil. So that means we're associated one with the other. And it's not living in the truth. But those who obey God's word truly show how completely they love him. That is how we know we are living in him. Now you see when they separate this out, they didn't separate the sentence out, and they put a 5 in there because that was the scripture 5. So that gets a little kind of funny when you start reading some of those. Those who say they live in God, verse 6, should live their lives as Jesus did. That's why we're called what? Christians. What does that mean? Christ-like. So if we're not obeying him, how can we be a Christian? It's a conundrum. It just can't work. So one day, Jesus is going to come back and he's going to establish true righteousness. Now, why would I use the term true righteousness? What's going to happen when Jesus comes? There's going to be a separation. And as he said in this parable, what's going to happen to the tares? They're going to be burned up instead of weeping and gnashing of teeth. Not a good place to visit. But what's going to happen to the wheat? They're going to be gathered up and what? Placed in the barn, which he was given a reference of heaven. There is no more time where Satan's influence is going to be demonstrated. True righteousness. Satan's people are going to be cast off in hell. Heaven and hell are two different locations. That's where true righteousness is going to be. The true followers of Christ will reign with him, but a glorious hope for the wheat. So ending it on a positive note. So again, a lot of stuff going here in the scriptures, a lot of 11 metaphors, all things going on. Questions you might have as far as what we have here are something I've said that we can talk about first. Okay, hope you survived it. Kind of buckle your seatbelts and get through this one. Okay, if there's no more questions, why don't we go ahead and we'll end with a prayer. Dear Father, your word has a lot of mystery in it. And it's deep. It's so deep sometimes that it's hard for us to understand, fully comprehend. But that's why you give it the Spirit. Because the Spirit allows us to get in there and understand a little bit more. And as I started this parable, I'll be honest with you, I did not understand a lot of it. I appreciate the fact that you would give that to me, and so I could learn. And hopefully that I have presented it in a way that edifies you, that your glory, your honor is really the forefront of what this is all about. Thank you so very much for this time. Be with us as we go through the service. It's later. Be with Sean and his sermon, because he does speak from the heart. We enjoy very much what he says. Thank you so very much. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.